Good morning, friends. Welcome to worship at St. Andrew. I'm Justin Bullis, the Director of Production and the Online Worship Experience, and it is my privilege, as always, to welcome you today. We are so grateful that you've chosen to join us here on our YouTube channel. Welcome to this sacred online space where you are invited, included, and valued as a vital and beloved member of our worshiping community. Please take a moment to check in at gostandrew.com/sign-in to let us know that you're here and where you're joining us from. You can also use the online form to let us know if you have any prayer concerns or questions about our church. You can also email us at connect@gostandrew.com if you would like to explore deeper engagement with the work God is doing in and through the St. Andrew community. We'd love to hear from you. As Reverend Mark reminds us every week, St. Andrew is an open, affirming, inclusive congregation that welcomes saints and sinners, believers and skeptics, the lost and the found, the wanderers and the wanderers, families of all shapes and sizes, and people from every point along life's journey. No matter who you are or where you've been, no matter what you believe or even if you believe anything at all, you are welcome here and you belong here. And now, please enjoy Reverend Mark's first sermon in our brand new series entitled Swimming Against the Tide, 7 Social Practices That Can Save the World.
As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when he heard this, he said,
"Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners."
If you knew everything about the future, what would you do differently? It's a question that futurist Faith Popcorn has been asking for decades. Popcorn is an expert in cultural and consumer trends. She's the Nostradamus of marketing. And as a future caster, she's identified these sweeping societal movements in business and politics and human behavior, all of which predict how Americans will think, what they'll value, and ultimately what they'll buy. And she advises dozens of CEOs of some of the largest and most successful companies in the world. I have been following Popcorn's work for over 3 decades, when she predicted the explosive growth of home shopping, home delivery, home businesses, home theaters, home schooling, and TV shows about home improvement. This was long before Amazon, Netflix, HGTV, and DoorDash. In fact, I remember when she predicted that one day, instead of leaving our houses to rent a video from Blockbuster, we just download movies to our TVs through a streaming service. And I thought, yeah, right, whatever, Faith Popcorn. Well, she claims a 95% accuracy rate in seeing what lies ahead. And her work has always informed my thinking about where the church is today and where it needs to go in the future. If we knew everything about the future of the church, what would we do differently today? How would we communicate our message, design our ministries, invest our resources to reach new people with the gospel? What human spiritual needs would we seek to meet? Popcorn has identified 17 global trends that reveal the future. And in this new series that starts today here, we're looking at 7 of those trends through the lens of the Christian faith. How are these trends impacting our lives and our world right now, for better or for worse? And how we can live in ways that offer a Christ-centered, life-giving alternative to all the cultural trends around us. And today we're exploring the trend that Popcorn calls clanning. Clanning is about belonging to a group that represents common feelings and values or ideals, where our own belief system is validated and normalized. And few of us would doubt that clanning is this universal human phenomenon. In fact, we've been clanning since we first inhabited this world 200,000 years ago. It's how our species survived. Without a clan, we'd get eaten. We'd go hungry. We'd die from sickness. There's strength in numbers, security in numbers. Teamwork makes the dream work, as they say. Well, today, not much has changed, except there's a whole lot more tribes and clans. Today, we look for our people, right? Sigma Chi, Kappa Kappa Gamma, Broncos fan, Christian, American, conservative, progressive, Democrat, Republican, Ford, Chevy, Mac, PC, Fox, CNN, Coke, Pepsi, cats, dogs, West Coast, East Coast, ski or ride. Personally, I'm a Ford driving, Mac using, dog loving, Diet Coke drinking skier. Have you noticed our clans are even more narrowly defined today than they've ever been? We're not just looking for one of those groups anymore. Today, clanning means we're looking for one kind of very specific group of people. The Sigma Chi pledging, Broncos cheering, Presbyterian church attending, chai tea drinking, moderate, unaffiliated voter who gets their news from Facebook, who are members of the local shooting club, and they raise backyard chickens, preferably Plymouth Rock variety. That's a pretty small clan. And if you can find it, wow, you have really found your people. But isn't this close to the truth in today's world? We seek out, sort out highly specific people who think like us, look like us, believe and act like us. This is how we feel safe and affirmed and valued. It's how we often find our identity and belongingness in this world. And this kind of clanning can save lives. Alcoholics Anonymous, grief groups, scouting and youth groups, churches, cancer or abuse survivor groups, bungee jumper support groups. But when our clanning weeds out those whose thoughts and opinions, whose interests and values or beliefs are contrary to our own, something in us begins to atrophy and die. When our clanning makes hard distinctions between us and them, that's when our families, our neighborhoods, our communities, our churches, our school boards, that's how even our very country becomes so sorted and segmented and polarized that closed-mindedness and mistrust and hostility soon define our whole way of life. And this is how we lose our common life. It's how we surrender our commitment to the common good. It's how we become tribalistic, exclusionary, extremist. It's how communities die. It's how compassion dies. It's how God's very spirit within us dies. We can't strip this human impulse for clanning from our human nature, but we can follow the lead of Jesus, who gave us a new strategy for divine clanning. It was a simple strategy, yet highly controversial in the first century world. Jesus hung out with sinners and tax collectors. Jesus expanded the traditional clans of his day to include those who, by outward appearances, and for many social and political and even philosophical reasons, were so unlike him and his people. In the gospel, these people are often called tax collectors and sinners. It's a common phrase in the Gospels. It meant something like that one group of schmucks and all the rest of the good-for-nothings of the world. Tax collectors and sinners. Tax collectors were pretty schmucky. I mean, we meet one in our text for today. His name is Matthew, and he's more crooked than Bernie Madoff and maybe more intimidating than Tony Soprano. He is something like a first-century mobster, a Jew who works for the Roman Empire. In other words, he's one of us, but he's on the enemy's payroll, which makes him a traitor. As a tax collector, Matthew could stop you on the street and assess duties on nearly everything in your possession. If you had a cart, he could tax you for each wheel. tax you for the animal that pulled it, tax you for the merchandise that it carried. And at the end of the month, Matthew sends a portion of his collections to the Roman governor, and anything over that amount, he's free to keep. And Matthew keeps a lot. The heavier the tax, the wealthier he gets, and the more his people suffer for it. And for that, Matthew is hated and cursed. One day, Jesus sees him on the street at his tax collecting desk. And Jesus says to him, "Come and follow me." And Matthew got up and followed him. We don't know why he got up and followed Jesus. We don't know if there's more to the story, if Matthew had some dramatic conversion right there at his tax desk, or if he was just curious maybe. All we know is he gets up. And together he and Jesus go to Matthew's home, where Matthew that very night throws a really big party. Maybe it was a celebration party, a kind of coming out party, like, hey, I've given up my old tax collecting miserable life, and today I'm a new person. We don't know for sure. What we do know is that all his friends come to the party. And the only friends that Matthew has, of course, are fellow tax collectors. The house is filled with tax collectors. It's like a tax collector convention. It's a schmuck reunion. But also, it says, some sinners drop in, according to the story. We don't know exactly what is meant by sinners, but they say misery loves company, and tax collectors probably found a lot of it. Sinners is just a label for the big bucket of every other miserable soul in the neighborhood. It probably included prostitutes, money changers, loan sharks, probably a handful of televangelists. People whose ways are shady and whose money is dirty. When the Pharisees go looking for Jesus, they find him at Matthew's house, eating, partying, talking, laughing. Jesus and the schmucks. For the Pharisees, it's more like Jesus and the neo-Nazis. Jesus and the Proud Boys. Jesus and Putin's acolytes. Jesus and the devil. And at that dinner with schmucks, Jesus has scandalized his own clan. He's crossed every boundary, crossed the line in the sand, crossed his own people, crossed even God himself. The writer Donald Miller, he once told the story about a question one of his teachers asked his elementary school class one day. The lesson was on values clarification, and the question was this: if you were in a lifeboat, and that lifeboat were adrift at sea, and in the lifeboat were a male lawyer, a female doctor, a crippled child, a stay-at-home mom, and a garbage man, and one person had to be thrown overboard to prevent the lifeboat from sinking, which person would you choose? Miller says that he can't quite remember for sure, but he thinks his whole class decided to throw the lawyer out of the boat. He says, I do remember that the class did not hesitate in deciding who had value and who didn't. Why is it that we humans so often function as though there's only so much room in our lifeboat? Why is it so hard to believe that there's maybe enough room after all for everyone in the boat? That at the end of the day, no one has to be thrown overboard. The Pharisees worked so hard to keep the tax collectors and sinners out of their lifeboat. But here's Jesus pulling them aboard one by one. Why? When the Pharisees complained, Jesus said, healthy people don't need a doctor, but sick people do. Jesus never forsook his clan. He was and always was a faithful Jew who loved his own people, but his mission was to build a bigger clan by healing the sick. He began that mission first by calling 12 mostly sketchy suspects to be his disciples. And then he sought out a handful of other people, men and women, who became his close friends, some of whom had their own sketchy pasts. It turns out, if you want to make sick people well, you actually have to seek out and find and hang out with sick people. I mean, who'd have known? If you want to redeem the world, you actually have to seek out those whom the world has labeled irredeemable. Go figure. If you want to win over the enemy and the adversary, you actually have to befriend them. And so at every turn, Jesus builds a bigger table. And then he goes out and he gathers more people, building and gathering over and over, never checking religious credentials first, never requiring proof of vaccination from the spiritual illnesses of this world, just expanding his clan and making people well, all because they needed a doctor. That was Jesus' mission. It's not entirely the fault of the Pharisees that they didn't understand. They loved their clan so much that they were simply willing to do anything to protect it, to keep out the imposters and the predators and the impure. You know what they say about finding just one rat in the house, right? And here they find Jesus sitting in a house full of them. Some Christians still love to blame the Pharisees for everything, labeling them as exclusivists, uptight legalists who are always trying to catch a cloud and pin it down. But we all wonder where the boundaries are, don't we? We all wonder if engagement with the enemy means endorsement, if compassion somehow means compromise, if respect somehow means resignation. But if Christ is at the center, there are no boundaries that should ever separate us from anyone. The Pharisees are furious because they do not understand this truth. In response to their protest, Jesus says, "Go and learn what the scriptures mean when they say, instead of offering sacrifices to me, I want you to be merciful to others." Jesus says it has to be learned. It's not a natural human impulse. For us, clanning means there have to be rules and consequences and boundaries and obligations. But for Jesus, clanning means that human compassion eclipses religious compulsion. It means that love transcends the law. It means mercy surpasses sacrifice. What about your clan? How big is your table? Are you building and gathering? Because the length and width of our table determines the breadth and depth of our compassion. Shortly after Pope Francis entered office, he gave this message that shocked many Christians around the world. Francis said that to be a Christian in the modern world is to meet all people, whether they are Christians or not, even atheists, to meet them at the place of doing good works. He spoke of the need to meet each other on our common ground, and he said this: "The commandment for everyone to do good is a beautiful path towards peace. If we, each doing our own part, do good to others, if we meet there doing good, and if we go slowly and gently, little by little, we will create a culture of encounter." A culture of encounter. It's an evocative image for Christians. It's the kind of clanning Jesus calls us to do. It's what Jesus created in every community he entered, a culture of encounter. To meet others regardless of who they are or what they believe or where they've been or what they've done. To find in them what matters most to them. To find the good in them and the good they long and hunger for. And to befriend that part of them. That's a culture of encounter. Someone told me this week about an encounter he had recently with a neighbor. As an openly gay man, he doesn't always feel safe and accepted in every personal encounter. And his neighbor is one who, at least by outward appearances, didn't feel very safe to him, if for no other reason than the Confederate flag that his neighbor flies in his front yard. And one day the neighbor was outside, sitting on his driveway with his face in his hands. He was crying. My friend was walking by on the sidewalk at the time. He stopped and addressed his neighbor by name and then asked him, "Why are you crying?" The neighbor said, "My sister was just diagnosed with cancer." My friend paused for a moment, and then he said, "My sister has cancer too." And he sat down beside his neighbor, and they cried together. Our takeaways for today: God desires mercy, not sacrifice. The length and width of our table determines the breadth and depth of our compassion. If we meet there, doing good, and we go slowly, gently, little by little, we will create a culture of encounter.
You can hold my hand when you need to let go. I can be your mountain when you're feeling out of the
Hi, this is Jamie Martin, Director of Outreach here at St. Andrew. I wanted to let you know that Big Serve 2022 was incredible. The day was both beautiful and impactful on so many levels. You cooked, cleaned, planted, painted, crafted, and tirelessly served, all in the name of love. St. Andrew, wow, how impressive you are, and you should be celebrated. I'm incredibly proud to be a part of this amazing, loving, and giving community. And I'm excited to share a glimpse of your big day.
And now, as you return to the rhythms and routines of your busy lives this week, May the God who created a world of diversity and vibrancy go with us as we embrace life in all its fullness. May the Son who teaches us to care for stranger and foreigners go with us as we try to be good neighbors in our communities. May the Spirit who breaks down our barriers and celebrates community go with us as we find the courage to create a place of welcome for all.